Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I am going to cover with you a few different myths from the very beginning of Greek mythology. So we started off by going over some popular heroes and cautionary tales, tales of hubris. And now I'd like to take a step back and formally go over the beginnings, and we'll start with the very beginning. So there are many different Genesis stories and many different mythologies, and we'll look at some of the quirks and differences and different versions that exist of the beginnings in Greek mythology. Plenty of lessons to be learned from reading these. We'll go over those, and then there's a quiz to check your knowledge and your understanding of everything. So we'll start with this one. This is the introduction to D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths. This is a more simplistic version, and then we're going to cover a slightly more sophisticated version, and then we'll go all the way back to Hesiod's version. And I think that will give us a pretty comprehensive covering. So we'll have two tertiary sources, and we'll go all the way back to a primary style source. In olden times, when men still worshipped ugly idols, there lived in the land of Greece a folk of shepherds and herdsmen who cherished light and beauty. They did not worship dark idols like their neighbors, but created instead their own beautiful, radiant gods. The Greek gods looked much like people and acted like them too, only they were taller, handsomer, and could do no wrong. Fire-breathing monsters and beasts with many heads stood for all that was dark and wicked. They were for gods and great heroes to conquer. The gods lived on top of Olympus, a mountain so high and steep that no man could climb it and see them in their shining palace. But they often descended to earth, sometimes in their own shapes, sometimes disguised as humans or animals. Mortals worshipped the gods, and the gods honored Mother Earth. They had all sprung from her, for she was the beginning of all life. So you immediately get the idea that life began from Gaia. Here's just this map of ancient Greece with some really great little interesting tidbits in there. I thought I'd give you a scan of that. And the Titans. I'm going to try and rotate this on yours. I'm going to read from it sideways right now, so I hope you really appreciate my contortions I'm going through to read this thing. The Titans were the first children of Mother Earth. They were the first gods, taller than the mountains she created to serve them as thrones. And both earth and sky were proud of them. There were 6 Titans, 6 glorious gods, and they had 6 sisters, the Titanesses, whom they took for their wives. Just get over any idea of incest. When you're talking about immortals, they don't share the same mortal rules with incest. There's no gene pools, there's no problems, and also there's nobody else to choose from. This is the beginning of creation. Please don't forget that. When Gaia again gave birth, Uranus was not proud. Their new children were also huge, but each had only one glowing eye set in the middle of his forehead. They were the 3 Cyclopes, and they were named Lightning, Thunder, and Thunderbolt. They were not handsome gods, but tremendously strong smiths. Sparks from their heavy hammers flashed across the sky and lit up the heavens so brightly that even their father's stars faded. So they worked at a smithy, they could forge things. After a while, Mother Earth bore 3 more sons. Uranus looked at them with disgust. Each of them had 50 heads and 100 strong arms. He hated to see such ugly creatures walk about on lovely Earth. So he seized them and their brothers, the Cyclopes, and flung them into Tartarus, the deepest, darkest pit under the earth. Mother Earth loved her children and could not forgive her husband for his cruelty to them. Out of hardest flint she fashioned a sickle and spoke to her sons, the Titans. Take this weapon, make an end to your father's cruelty, and set your brothers free. Fear took hold of 5 of the Titans. They trembled and refused. Only Cronos, the youngest but the strongest, dared to take the sickle. He fell upon his father. Uranus could not withstand the weapon wielded by his strong son, and he fled, giving up his powers. Mother Earth made Pontus, the boundless sea, her second husband, and from this union sprang the gods of the watery depths. And from her rich ground grew an abundance of trees and flowers, and out of her crevices sprites, beasts, and early man crept forth. This is definitely the made-for-children version, as we'll find when we get to some of the more complex counterparts. This is sort of a beautiful lithograph here. You can see the Titans and the Titanesses. You can see Kronos bearing the sickle. You can see a representation of Gaia crying tears as she's so sad about her other children who have been banished away. I love how you see all the crazy hands grasping and the stars representing Uranus. That's fantastic. Beautiful. Then we get to Zeus and his family. Zeus was tended by gentle nymphs and was nursed by the fairy goat Amalthea. From the horns of the goat flowed ambrosia and nectar, the food and drink of the gods. Zeus grew rapidly, and it was not long before he strode out of the cave as a great new god. To thank the nymphs for tending him so well, he gave them the horns of the goat. They were horns of plenty and could never be emptied. From the hide of the goat he made for himself an impenetrable breastplate, the Aegis, and now he was so strong that Cronos could do nothing against him. Young Zeus chose Metis, a Titan's daughter, for his first wife. She was the goddess of prudence, and he needed her good advice. She warned him not to try alone to overthrow his child-devouring father, for Cronos had all the other Titans and their sons on his side. First, Zeus must have strong allies. Metis went to Cronos and cunningly tricked him into eating a magic herb. He thought that the herb would make him unconquerable. Instead, it made him so sick that he vomited up not only the stone he had swallowed, but his 5 other children as well. They were the gods Hades and Poseidon, and the goddess Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, almighty gods who right away joined forces with Zeus. When Cronos saw the 6 young gods rise against him, he knew that his hour had come, and he surrendered his powers and fled. Now Zeus was the lord of the universe. He did not want to rule alone. Their sons, but the Titans and their sons revolted. He shared his powers with his brothers and sisters, but the Titans and their sons revolted. They refused to let themselves be ruled by the new gods. Only Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus left the Titans to join Zeus. For Prometheus could look into the future, and he knew that Zeus would win. Zeus freed the monstrous sons of Mother Earth from Tartarus. Gratefully, the 100-armed ones fought for him with all their strength, and the Cyclopes forged mighty weapons for him and his brothers. They made a trident for Poseidon. It was so forceful that when he struck the ground with it, the earth shook, and when he struck the sea, frothing waves stood mountain high. For Hades, they made a cap of invisibility so he could strike his enemies unseen, and for Zeus, they forged lightning bolts. Armed with them, he was the mightiest god of them all. Nothing could stand against him in his thunderbolts. The Titans fought a bitter battle, but at last they had to surrender, and Zeus locked them up in Tartarus. The 100-armed monsters went to stand guard at the gates to see they were never escaped. Atlas, the strongest of the Titans, was sent to the end of the world to carry forever the vault of the sky on his shoulders. And you may have seen, like in the World's Strongest Man contests and things, their trophy for that for years was a statue of Atlas holding the world on his shoulders. Pretty cool. Anyway, angry with Zeus for sending her sons, the Titans, into the darkest pit of Tartarus, Mother Earth now brought forth 2 terrible monsters, Typhon and his mate Echidna, and sent them against Zeus. They were so fearful that when the gods saw them, they changed themselves into animals and fled in terror. Typhon's 100 horrible heads touched the stars. Venom dripped from his evil eyes, and lava and red-hot stones poured from his gaping mouths. Hissing like 100 snakes and roaring like 100 lions, he tore up whole mountains and threw them at the gods. Interesting side note, some historians sort of set this up as well, and mythologists, that when the gods flew from Greece, they traveled south in animal form, and hence you get the animal-headed gods of the Egyptians, which were simply the Greek gods with animal heads. Kind of an interesting idea. Zeus soon regained his courage and turned, and when the other gods saw him taking his stand, they came back to help him fight the monster. A terrible battle raged, and hardly a living creature was left on earth. But Zeus was fated to win, and as Typhon tore up huge Mount Etna to hurl at the gods, Zeus struck it with 100 well-aimed thunderbolts, and the mountain fell back, pinning Typhon underneath. There, the monster lies to this very day, belching fire, lava, and smoke at the top of the mountain. Echidna, his hideous mate, escaped destruction. She cowered in a cave, protecting Typhon's dreadful offspring, and Zeus let them live as a challenge to future heroes. And if you look down, you can see the Nemean lion, Cerberus, Ladon, the Chimera, the Sphinx, and the Hydra, all suckling and cowering and finding shelter with their mother, Echidna, the mother of monsters. Here's this cool lithograph of Zeus, looking all heroic. And I have to stop here and start another recording because I am running out of time on this particular recording program. Let me see, I only have 5 minutes. Is that enough to read all of this? What do you think? Should we go for it? Let's go for it. Now at last Mother Earth gave up her struggle. There were no more upheavals, and the wounds of the war soon healed. The mountains stood firmly anchored, the seas had their shores, the rivers had their riverbeds, and ox-horned river gods watched them over them, and each tree and each spring had its nymph. The earth again was green and fruitful, and Zeus could begin to rule in peace. The one-eyed Cyclopes were not only smiths but masons as well, and they built a towering palace for the gods on top of Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece. The palace was hidden in clouds, and the goddesses of the seasons rolled them away whenever a god wanted to go down to earth. Nobody else could pass through the gate of clouds. Iris, the fleet-footed messenger of the gods, had her own path down to earth. Dressed in a gown of iridescent drops, she ran along the rainbow on her busy errands between Olympus and Earth. Iris, the rainbow goddess, right, who runs along the rainbows and communicates messages. Here's a great lithograph here again, showing us the gate of clouds being opened so a god can leave. And here's half of the Greek pantheon here. In the gleaming hall of the palace, where light never failed, the Olympian gods sat on 12 golden thrones and reigned over heaven and earth. There were 12 great gods, for Zeus shared his powers, not only with his brothers and sisters, but with 6 of his children and the goddess of love as well. Zeus himself sat on the highest throne, with a bucket full of thunderbolts beside him. On his right sat his youngest sister, Hera, whom he had chosen from all his wives as his queen. Beside her sat her son Ares, god of war, and Hephaestus, god of fire, with Aphrodite, goddess of love, between them. Next was Zeus's son Hermes, the herald of the gods, and Zeus's sister Demeter, goddess of the harvest, with her daughter Persephone on her lap. On the left of Zeus sat his brother Poseidon, the lord of the sea. Next to him sat the 4 children of Zeus, Athena, the twins Apollo and Artemis, and Dionysus, the youngest of the gods. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, Apollo, the god of light and music, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and Dionysus, the god of wine. Hestia, the eldest sister of Zeus, was goddess of the hearth. She had no throne, but tended the sacred fire in the hall, and every hearth on earth was her altar. She was the gentlest of all the Olympians. Hades, the eldest brother of Zeus, was the lord of the dead. He preferred to stay in his gloomy palace in the underworld, and never went to Olympus. The gods themselves could not die, for divine ichor flowed in their veins instead of blood. Most of the time they lived happily together, feasting on sweet-smelling ambrosia and nectar. But when their wills clashed, there were violent quarrels. Then Zeus would reach for a thunderbolt, and the Olympians would tremble and fall to order, for Zeus alone was stronger than all the gods together. And we did it, we finished it. So it's an interesting introduction. It's a little simpler. Some things are summarized, and I hope this serves as a fast, quick little intro to the very beginnings of Greek mythology.